everyone. Welcome back to Project Celebrating Singles. We have a podcast today where I, Catherine, am hosting you, and we actually have Christy in the hot seat today, which is a fun surprise. Christy, welcome here.
Thanks. I don't know how I feel about being on the other side, but here we are.
No, really excited. We'll see how deep we go and a few things that are going to come up in this episode, but really looking forward to it. And so, hey, if you're new here on the podcast, we are doing a project called Celebrating Singles, clearly, where there's a group of us who've just kind of gotten fed up with seeing single people on the sidelines, maybe stagnantly waiting for a partner to come by, for life to be fulfilled in that moment where you have romantic love, different things like that. And we're just recognizing, wow, there's so much healing and joy and adventure that can happen in life here and today. And so we really want to just take a sledgehammer. We've seen that a little bit once or twice on our Instagram page, to these lies and these ideas, these lenses that our culture is feeding us that we're just done with, dude. And so we're on this journey to really empower people in their singleness in whatever stage of journey they're at today. And so, Christy, so excited to have you here. We're going to go after it. And, you have been doing this journey for a while with coaching people in their singleness, finding value, purpose in their lives. And I'm just so curious. You see these people, whether going through highs or lows, and I would love to know, what do you really wish people could hear or know, that they would just understand on this journey of singleness, of who they are according to their value? What do you just, when you're like, I just wish you could understand this, can't you get it in your head? And so I just love to hear it. What are some of these things where you're like, come on, you got this, and you just want to speak that into people?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say both men and women. Actually, there is one common denominator that sticks out in almost everyone I coach. And it's really not having your own value and not knowing your own value inherently apart from a romantic relationship. And so you're constantly looking subconsciously, most of it's subconscious, to this other romantic partner to fulfill that in you. So for a lot of people, both men and women, finding someone really, really attractive, really fit makes them feel more valuable. Literally, you can see this all over Instagram. Someone posts this picture with this amazing looking spouse, right? Whatever, men or women, again, both struggle with this. And they're like, oh, lucky me. And it's like, well, this person could be total trash internally. And actually, I know some people like this, where it's like, man, that person looks really good on the outside, but internally it's hell to be married to them. And yet their Instagram says, oh, this person, looks really, really nice at these, whatever Christmas events. And so I think what I really would love for people to start to identify is like, okay, where in my own life am I believing lies about my self-worth and value that I am looking to someone else? And so one way you can start to uncover this is look back at your most recent relationships or the people that you maybe like started to develop feelings for. What do you like about them? And that's going to start to feed into actually vision for your life. So for me, it was definitely like the physical attraction. And I actually feel like I am meant to empower like true inner and outer beauty. And yet for the longest time, like I continue to find my value in how attractive, like who I was dating. I also looked at career success. So I was definitely one that like really cared about intellect and how smart is he? What's he do for a living? That kind of thing. Well, actually, when I look at my own life, now I can start to develop vision and start to understand, well, wait a minute, like I am a businesswoman. I'm a career woman. I love to be able to build. I love to be able to build things that impact people 40 to 50 hours a week. And I love to be able to help launch other entrepreneurs on that same vein. But I was looking to a romantic partner for that without realizing that I actually am supposed to walk in all of this. And I'm looking to someone else. Same with actually as a musician. I really secretly always really like musicians. And which was just kind of interesting. Like that's kind of, it seems random. Well, now actually like just a few years ago, I started playing piano and I love playing piano now. Like who would have thought, like in my 30s, I discovered this hobby. But actually, if I would have looked to what I valued in other people, specifically in a romantic partner, you can actually use it as a roadmap to develop vision for your own self-worth in your own life. And we look to someone else to fulfill that when we aren't carrying it, and we're not carrying it in the way that I believe we're meant to carry it. And so that is something that I would say for both men and women, as I've had so many conversations, it like literally now pains me to look at someone and realize that they're heartbroken over their last relationship because of X, Y, and Z, when
Mhm.
actually, if they really sat down and developed vision and purpose for their own life, they're actually meant to walk in all of those things that they were looking to someone else to fulfill in their heart. And so that is something I'm really passionate about. Obviously, we talk about it in the online course, but developing vision for your own life, but understanding your self-worth. It took me a lot of self-reflection time, self-awareness, right? Of like, why am I really attracted to this person? And actually going back and being like, well, wait a minute. Like, I'm actually supposed to walk in all of those things. I don't need someone else to establish that value in me. And so that is definitely something, obviously, I'm very passionate about, as you probably just figured
Right.
out.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's so good. I love that.
Yeah.
And can you speak a little bit more into that self-worth piece? Like people need to know that they have permission to believe in themselves and to find contentment and enjoy and excitement in who they are. And so, can you talk a little bit more? How would someone get to that place? You're talking about reflection,
Mhm.
uncovering lies, wrong beliefs, different things like that. So what does that look like for someone who perhaps is not used to embracing who they are and really walking with their head held high in a place that's not fake, but it's actually who they become. And so, how do you get there?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think it's a journey for everyone. And
Hmm.
I'm definitely, I wouldn't say I've arrived, but I've definitely been on a journey over the last few years. And actually, singleness has allowed the time and space to process a lot of this. I would say it's going to look different for different people. For me, I grew up in the Midwest and like, kind of this like false humility, like I need to be last, like I need to constantly serve others, and my needs always come last. Well, that's actually really, really unhealthy on a bunch of different levels. In fact, if everyone were to operate that way, like society as a whole would be really unhealthy. And psychologists and therapists all agree that like people pleasing and codependency, and attachment styles and all of that, there's some really big unhealth when you continue to put yourself last. And so I would
Mm.
say that's a journey that everyone needs to go on, and it is going to look different for everyone. But for me, it looked like a lot of honestly spending time alone and getting used to spending time with myself, and actually figuring out why I didn't like doing that. And we can talk about that, I don't know, now or later, but and kind of unhealthy coping mechanisms that I absolutely walked in unknowingly for a bunch of years, that I, again, part of the impetus for this podcast and this channel was to help people in their 20s not make the same mistakes that we all did. And so that's definitely something I'm passionate about. So there's a bunch of different ways. Obviously, going to therapy, I'm a huge fan, like really pro
Mhm.
therapy. And I mean, shameless plug for our online course, but our online course does help you unpack and walk through some tools that are practical, that are actually pretty small. One of them is like literally spending time in self-reflection in a journal. So for me, I can't really think. I'm an external processor, both
Mhm.
verbally and through written processing. And so when my friend encouraged me to start journaling, I thought she was totally whack. I was like, oh, it's not really for me. That's for the like creative types. I feel like Erin, that would be like an obvious choice for you. But I was more like black or white. I'm like, I don't really know about journaling. And then I started and I have never stopped. And now I mean, I have journals for days from the last
Mm.
probably 10 years or so as when I started journaling. And so sometimes it's really just learning how to sit alone with your thoughts and realize, oh wow, like I have this emotion here. What do I do with that? And yeah, and other things like that.
That's great. Actually, can you talk a little bit more into journaling? So do you think journaling's for everyone to do? Or is that just something that works for you? Or what would you say?
To be honest, I have a lot of people tell me it's not for them. And then when they try it, they all say it was for them. They just didn't think
Mm.
of it. So, or they just didn't think they would like it. So I've never met anyone that started journaling that stopped. So I don't know if that is helpful, maybe an
Yeah.
anecdote. But I have a bunch of people that have procrastinated and delayed it only to find out when they started it, they're like, I wish I would have listened to you years sooner. And it's okay, great. So maybe, again, don't make others mistakes. Like just try it. I
Yeah.
think whether you're an internal or external processor, writing down your thoughts, writing down questions, and then sitting and leaving space, or getting off your device for a while, super helpful, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes a day to start. Like you'll grow capacity. That's the other thing I would say is like, now I can sit and journal for hours, like, and it's so
Mm.
therapeutic to me. But in the beginning, I could barely do 2 to 3 minutes, and it was like, okay, yep, check, bye, like on with my workday. Um, and so it's just like working out. You build that muscle, and you'll start to enjoy it more. And then it starts to, our brains are, really well wired in a sense of like you start to use it to process some stuff going on inside your mind, and your brain then, responds to that positive feedback loop, right? That reward.
Right.
So the more you do it, I often say, like, you can't eat a salad once and expect to reach your fitness goals. Like, that doesn't work that way. No, you have to eat healthy consistently. You have to work out consistently. Like, there are things that you have to do, sort of the mundane, that you have to continue with incrementally. But you can make really small changes at first. It doesn't have to be a huge change. And, we teach, in the course about stacking your habits so that there's an easier on-ramp to making those changes. So there's a bunch of different practical ways. And I always say, like, if I can do it, anyone can do this, because I was an absolute mess and disaster, which we can get into. I think that's kind of the goal for today. So I was an absolute mess and disaster in my singleness. So if I can arrive where I'm at, and I definitely haven't arrived fully, but I would say I've come a long way. And some of these practical tools are really just small incremental changes that I made along the way that now, we're here to package and give away, because I want the world to be able to walk in joy. And I want the world to be able to walk in really just, like, I would say, like, enjoyment of their life, regardless of their marital status.
Yeah, that's so good. Journaling is so powerful for me also. I'm a daily journaler, and I love it, just to see the growth, the transformation over months, years, even reading back on these things, like, wow, there is real change that comes, right? And it's only through genuinely processing what is coming up and facing both the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And so I'm big pro journaler over here for it. Okay, so you're talking a little bit about, wrong mindsets that people are having, getting rid of these things. So, and this is something that's also on the curriculum, the online introductory course. You talk about replacing lies with truth. And so I'm just really curious, what does that look like in your journey that has now led to this place of, okay, this is what people need. Let's break up with these things. So what does that look like in your story?
Yeah, so I am super passionate about this tool. Full giveaway, like, we talk about this in the online course, but the actual tool is pretty simple. You identify lies you're believing or unhealthy thought patterns, and you hold space with submersion, and you replace those lies with truth. And neuroscience has proven the neuroplasticity of our minds. Like, you can literally rewire your synapses, and it's super helpful to do so. So I would say there are probably three main categories of lies that people are stuck in, that through coaching, I don't know how many people now, these are, like, kind of the three big ones that I wanted to talk about. And they kind of run in three categories of shame, fear, and control. So I'll break these down a little bit. The lie of shame. So for me, here's the big reveal for those who maybe don't know me or are learning about this podcast for the first time. So for years, I was stuck in really giving my body away sexually to a bunch of people who didn't earn it. And I had a lot of sexual partners. And then I just started justifying it, like, I'm free. I'm this woman that's exploring my sexuality, which in all actuality was actually not true behind the scenes. Like, in my heart, I really made some mistakes pretty early on because of people-pleasing tendencies. And so this all kind of goes hand in hand, right? So people-pleasing tendencies leads to some really just bad decision-making at a young age with giving my body away to people who didn't deserve it. And then what leads to that, so that shame cycle then was like, oh, I'm going to, like, justify this by just going out and doing it more. And that was a really, really bad cycle that actually led to not just a lot of sexual partners, but it led to, like, drinking heavily and binge drinking and a bunch of other habits that were super unhealthy for me. And frankly, like, really unhealthy, I think, for anyone. Like, I'm not saying alcohol itself is bad, but binge drinking, as I was literally blacking out like 3 or 4 nights a week type of binge drinking. Like, it was pretty intense. And this is after college. This isn't just like in college, like that kind of culture. This is after college, after I'm working. And I was a high functioning alcoholic at the time. But below the surface was a ton of shame. And then that kind of catapulted into all these other behaviors that, unbeknownst to me, right? Like, it took tools, it took therapy to start to understand these cycles. But the lies of shame keep people trapped in unhealthy relationships. And then they continue down these cycles. And so if you don't be intentional, if you're not intentional with singleness through therapy or through, this online course or other ways you can do it, we're not just saying ours is the only thing. Like, do something though, and be intentional with singleness, because history will repeat itself unless you actually fix like the disease root system, which I didn't
Right.
realize was there, but it was totally trapped in shame.
Mm.
So, and then I would say the second category is fear.
One sec.
So
Can you give a few examples of lies that people could be believing related to shame? What are some things that would go through your head?
yeah, I mean, I would say, so for me, it was like, well, I've already, from an early age, it was like, I already lost my virginity. So like, I'm kind of like, I'm already used. Like, it's like, oh,
Mm,
might as well just keep
mhm.
doing this. And it was like, or I already made that mistake with that one guy and now everyone knows it. So now I'm just like, I'm that person, which is so terrible of a cycle, especially for
Mhm.
young women who are like, your brains are developing still, you're still developing like who you are as a person. Like, man, if I could, if anyone's listening to this and you're in high school or you're in college, like, make decisions that help set you up for success later. And I would say like, those strong feelings at a really young age were actually completely misplaced in people pleasing. And again,
Mhm.
not knowing my own value and not knowing that my
Right.
body is valuable and I don't have to just give it away to anyone who like gives me attention. But that shame says I made a mistake once and I'm going to continue down that, because you start to identify it. It starts to take on your identity, right? Like, yeah, I'm the girl that like, sleeps around. Like, who cares? Like, I would just kind of
Right.
start to justify it. But the shame cycle will say, I made a mistake once, therefore that determines my future, which is so not true. Like, you can make a mistake, right? Like you fall when walking, or that doesn't mean like you're always a clumsy person. You just fell one time. And so
Right.
shame loves to lie and say past mistakes will predict your future. And that is absolutely not true. In fact, like complete opposite in my experience. And now after I've made healthier choices and gone on this journey of, with a growth mindset and different pieces of this, now my life looks completely different. And I like really, really enjoy my singleness. But it's because I got out of that shame cycle. Does that help?
Yeah, that really clears it, because I think sometimes people don't even recognize that they're living in shame, you know?
Oh, for sure.
We're such high functioning people that we don't even know how to slow down and take a deeper look at why we are doing what we're doing, right? And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's just nice to have those examples of, so that people can be like, "Oh yeah, I resonate with that," right? And it, once again, like you said, takes time in your journal, slowing down, being intentional. And I like what you even said just about going back to, with casting vision for your life, is like, why did I date that person? Why did I have sex with that person? Why did I do this? And really being honest with yourself. And then from there, you can change your mindset or whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah,
It's good.
absolutely. Well, and I want to be a voice of hope to people who have maybe been in that cycle for a really long time. Because I
Hmm.
was in that cycle for the better part of like 8.5 years, and it was so unhealthy for me physically,
Hmm.
emotionally, spiritually, all of it, even professionally. Like it started to like mix into my professional life, which got really bad. So I would just say like there's hope. And like again, if my life can be like totally changed, I am full of hope that others can too.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that's just really sad also too is that like culture justifies it and celebrates it, right? And we don't even recognize that there are those undercover reasons of why we're doing this. Yet it's something like, rah, 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 you do you, that's amazing. And we're not here to tell anyone necessarily what to change in their life per se. These are all tools that we want to give to people through speaking through personal experience of growth and changes that we've had in our own lives, right? But it's like, it's heartbreaking how some of this stuff is celebrated, yet it's people in pain and trauma and cycles of lies and shame, like you're saying, that are then causing them to live these lifestyles, right?
Yeah, I would say there is neuroscience research to that shows us what happens to our brain after a lot of sexual partners, and it's really bad. And I think there's more research to come on this because more and more people are starting to figure this out. Like, wait a minute, this isn't emotionally healthy, this isn't physically healthy. There's a lot there, and I am like really excited, I would say, for that research to come out, because it then starts to expose some of, again, these like unhealthy thought patterns that we've been in, or just culture has shaped. I would say, a big part of the other part of my journey is this lie that I had really attached love to romantic love. So,
Mm.
and I started to realize, like, I had this profound moment actually, that I was like, wait a minute, literally from a very early age, Disney movies, marketing, TV shows, everything equates love with romantic love and usually sex. Like it usually has that like marketing. And I started noticing like billboards pretty rarely. Sometimes a hospital might show like a parent-child relationship. But, marketing says sex sells. Like most love we see in marketing has to do with sex. So
Right.
subconsciously, my mind as a young woman was wired to believe that I only have value when Prince Charming says I have value, or I only have value when I get into a romantic relationship, which is super unhealthy. And honestly, one of the bigger thought patterns that I walk people through in coaching, because it's subconscious. We don't realize that movies, books, TV shows, marketing, music, everything that we've been consuming media wise has really fed us this narrative of love that's actually really untrue, really unhealthy, really unrealistic. I think it's a
Mm.
huge reason why we see divorce rates the way that we do, is because we think we've like made it when we get romantic love, because that's what the movies and the music and the marketing portrays. And then we get into these relationships and reality hits us, and we wonder like, oh shoot, like what just happened here? And so I think we've got to back up a lot, and that's something I'm really passionate about. And so that's definitely like another huge lie that I had to work through, was that love equals romantic love, because love is actually really beautifully experienced through a parent-child relationship. Most people maybe didn't have that kind of experience, maybe
Mm-hmm.
didn't have emotionally available parents, but that is actually like the design of a parent-child love. And anyone who's had a kid will tell you, like literally, I mean, I had my cousin tell me it's like his operating system changed when he had a kid. And it was
Wow.
like, oh my gosh, I love this human so much, right? Well, for a single, we don't necessarily like recognize that like that love is possible or available. And then there's also like beautiful love between siblings, right? Like my
Mm-hmm.
relationship with my brother is one that I am so grateful for and so thankful for. And his love for me is really beautiful and needed in my life and really necessary in almost everyone's lives. And then you've got, love between friends that are totally platonic. But to be honest, like some of my guy friendships have been so important in my life. And I totally used to write off guy friendships. I didn't even think that was possible. I think we talked about this in another episode, but like for the longest time, guy friends always ended up in a romantic relationship. And I didn't even know you could have a healthy relationship with someone of the opposite sex,
Right.
that you were maybe attracted to even. And so, yeah, now I'm,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you asked me a question, I'm getting going.
No, that's good, girl. I love the word that you just said, necessary. You didn't realize that like romantic love, it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Love is
Yeah.
necessary,
Oh,
but romantic love isn't necessary. And how many of us are feeling like, I need a partner, I need, it's like, actually, you don't. Like, there's so many available places to give and receive love, right? Yeah, that's an amazing one that you've uncovered, that love is only romantic. But it's actually,
yeah.
it's so much bigger, so much bigger.
Big fat lie. Big fat lie. And I think what it does to us too is it like again undermines our self-value, because it says you're not good enough, right? Everyone's like, oh, I found my other half that completes me. Oh, I like
Mm,
literally cringe every time I hear that, because I'm like, this is not setting you or your partner up for success. Like if you believe you're only halfway completed. Now, does love like grow exponentially? Will it expand, your purpose, like your, contribution to society? Absolutely. And I think that that's what people are trying to articulate, I would guess. But for singles, if you feel that longing in your heart, I would say that longing in your heart can and will be fulfilled if you choose some healthy choices. Where a lot of people maybe didn't have that in their biological family. Okay, well, there are other ways that you can get that, again, through making different life choices. And so, yeah, I would just say like there's totally room for a wider, broader definition of fulfilling that longing in your heart, because that's real. Like people have, I
mm-hmm,
think we are inherently born with this longing to be loved, to be known, to be
mm-hmm.
deeply known. And I just think, again, not to blame the media industry. I love the media industry. I used to work in it. Like
Right.
I'm a big fan of storytelling. I'm a big fan of all that. But I think it just has to do with probably, hundreds of years of culture, saying like, and it used to obviously be a lot more of a necessity than it is now, but saying like, oh, you've made it once you get into a romantic relationship or once you've been married. which again, I am really excited to take a sledgehammer to these lies so that people know they have value
Yeah.
in and before marriage, after marriage, right? Like we have so many friends that are single again, that were really not expecting to be single again for a bunch of different reasons. Okay, you've got someone who's like a widow. Now, all of a sudden, I'll never forget, actually, quick story time.
Ready.
It is like, I don't know, almost midnight, I think, at the airport. And I'm waiting for my friend to pick me up. And I'm like one of the last people, right? Like, I think she maybe forgot me or something, but she was on her way. So this woman is in a wheelchair and I can see her. She has two large bags and she like barely made it out of like the baggage area. And, you know, the place to be picked up is quite far. So I thought, oh, you know, I'll go help her, like get her bags and like obviously bring her over. She's like very clearly in a wheelchair. So I get over there and so I introduce myself and I offer to help her. And she goes, well, where's your husband? And I was like, my husband, like, I don't need a husband. Like, I'm here. I have a very able body. Like, I'm here to help you. And it was just so sad to me. Well, it turns out like she was a widow. So we ended up having this beautiful exchange and beautiful conversation. But later I was kind of debriefing that interaction. And I was like, wait a minute, why did she like automatically assume we needed a husband? And it's like, well, because she got married. She said she got married like at like 22 or something. So like for most of her life, I think that was like her experience, right? Her husband probably helped her with her luggage. That's awesome. That's great. You know, great for people who have husbands. I'm turning 37 soon. I've never had a husband. I'm very capable of carrying my own luggage. And I was very capable of helping her with hers. So I was like, well, I don't have a husband, but I'm here. Can I help you? And so I obviously helped her with her luggage, help her get over to the curb. But it was just kind of this moment of like, oh, wait, like so many people actually don't have, like they just have different synapses, different go-tos, right? Just like my go-to is like, I don't usually have someone traveling with me. So I carry my own heavy luggage. I've lived to tell the tale. But someone who got married really young, you know, she automatically assumes like she sees a woman and she's like, oh, we need a man to do this. And I was like, so sad about that. So, okay, I do want to double click though on, I want to go back to these like categories of lies because I think those are important. If that's cool, we go there.
Please, absolutely.
So the first category that I see the most of, common denominator, is shame. Right? The lie that your past predicts your future, or past mistakes predict your future. So this next category is fear. And then the last category is control. So fear, this is going to be a good one because here's vulnerability alert. Fear tells me like fear of the unknown. Okay. Fear of making a wrong decision. I can't tell you how long I was stuck in that lie. I was so, because of my past and because I was such a people pleaser and didn't know my own value, didn't make good decisions in relationships as a result, I was so afraid for years in my singleness that I was going to make the wrong choice. And it was like this whole, I don't know. For years, I'm stuck in this lie that I'm going to make a wrong choice when it comes to, my next relationship, not even maybe a spouse, but really even just like a dating decision, which is a huge lie and one based in fear. So I usually tell my clients like, okay, let's think about your approach to dating. Let's think about your approach to singleness, even, potential relationship or potential marriage. If there's anything in your thought process that you can track back to fear, you're not going down the right way. And you don't have a healthy baseline, or you don't have the right lens to be looking at this problem. So a good example of this would be people who are like trying to decide, do I move cities or do I take this new job? And there's a ton of fear behind that. I know for me, part of my story is I made a huge move from Austin where I lived for almost 8 years, had a really beautiful community. Shout out to my Austin friends. And I get this new job in San Francisco. And it was so much fear of why I didn't want to take this new job. I was like starting all over in a bunch of different categories of my life. I'm like, how do I do this? I don't want to do this. It's more expensive. I was lie and based in fear about money. So many women stuck in that, like, oh, in order to build actual wealth, like I need to wait until I get married. Wrong. Start investing, buy the house, go on the vacation. Like, do not wait for someone else to start investing in your financial health. But really, so the second category of lies is all fear-based. But fear often is actually disguised in control. So let's talk
Mm.
about control next. So these lies about control. So I years ago would have called myself a control freak. I I was like type A control freak. Here's how this played out. I organized my life in 15-minute calendar increments, and I had everything in my life planned out in my little mind.
Uh-huh.
And I probably lived this way, I don't know, 7, 10 years. Um, and I really loved, again, this is all subconscious. I couldn't have told you any of this, even though I would have said I was a control freak. I didn't really understand how bad that is.
Uh-huh.
It's like this facade that makes you feel really good about your life, but it's a total facade. And post COVID, I think we're all on this journey now of like, wait, I actually have no control over pretty
Right.
much anything. Like,
Mhm.
oh shoot, what just happened? That's why everyone's freaking out, during this COVID lockdown. It's like all of a sudden our control gets ripped out from underneath of us. Well, control is our friend because of real situations in our childhood where we weren't safe. And so we start controlling our environment. Many
Mhm.
people start controlling their food, what they eat, how much they eat. Like eating disorders, usually you can tie back to thought patterns of control. And so it's really interesting how control starts playing out. And it's a big fat lie. Like there's a bunch of thought patterns that are attached to this kind of category of control that I help walk clients through and understanding how this is playing out in their life. And it usually is disguised as like, I'm being smart, like
Mhm.
I'm being savvy. Like I'm gonna, plan out ding ding ding. I would plan out my vacations like 7 months in advance, and I would have everything down to a T, all spreadsheets. Like my friends used to make fun of me. I had for my, I can't remember if it was like my 30th birthday or something like that. I had like a 42 line item spreadsheet.
Wow, that's amazing.
And people make fun of me to this day for that spreadsheet. I was pretty proud of it. My
Honestly,
love language
it's
is
a little impressive, Christy. That's yeah. I love that. The
I
commitment,
really love
the
spreadsheet.
planning, the
But it was
thoughtfulness.
control. Let me walk you through the control of that birthday party. So
Please.
I decide that it's going to be a good idea. We were going to have this cookout. And I was like, okay, I'm not dealing with I'm not going to bring everything. I wanted to throw a big bash. I like big parties. So
Mhm.
I was like, but I'm not going to totally do it all. So my friends are going to contribute. So I make this spreadsheet, and literally I had this genius idea that if people sign up for something pretty important, then they have to show up. So I start delegating certain things like the wine opener to someone who I'm like, they might be iffy. I really want them there. And if they don't come, we don't have a wine opener. So I'm going to delegate that to them. Like total control.
Wow.
Like this person's going to be in charge of plates because they're going to know they have to come. So it's like this person's flaky. I want them there. I'm going to delegate plates to them so they have to show up. And they have to show up on time. So then I had a time category where if you showed up at the earlier side, then you had to bring these items. If you are going to be late, then you're going to bring the dessert or whatever. But
Wow.
one could call that highly organized, or one
Uh-huh.
could call that
Uh-huh.
oh, Christy, you're trying to control your environment. You're literally
Right.
controlling who shows up to your
Right.
birthday party
Totally.
and when
Yes.
and how long
Wow.
they're going to be there.
Right. Which comes back
Like,
to motives, right? It's all about your motives, right? So,
well, and again, control is this lie, this facade that really is normally coupled with fear, right? The fear is no one's going to show up to my birthday. The fear is that person isn't going to show up. And so what do? You control.
mhm.
And this plays out in other ways too, right? Where it's like, okay, you control your environment for safety reasons or whatever, right? And so there's some things that you do that, yeah. But I would say in dating, control is usually wrapped in fear, which is usually also tied to shame, and it's this
Mm.
ugly, ugly slew of thought patterns that keep people trapped. And again,
Mhm.
I would say we talk about this in the course, but the goal of identifying these things is not to say, oh my gosh, I am so broken and I am such a mess. Like, oh, do you want to date me? Here I am. No, it's to actually literally break up with these lies. Like in the course, we literally teach you to break up with these lies. Again,
Mhm.
neuroscience shows us that our brains can literally be rewired. So you're not stuck in these thought patterns. Like I am no longer a control freak. In fact, it's hilarious. I mean, Catherine, you know me, I'm probably one of the more spontaneous people now of all my friends. Like I
Yeah.
love spontaneity. because I realized all this control was like a big fat lie. So, but I would say like it's pretty important to identify these, and then you can have a healthier lens when you're living your life for both yourself and your other relationships, including your future marriage or partnership. And so that's really the goal of identifying these lies. It's not being like, oh, great, here's all my junk, all my problems, but more so to work through that, process it so that you can have a healthier lens when approaching new relationships, which is really, the whole goal of Celebrating Singles is to help people get to a healthier place, whether you're single for 5 more days, 5 more months, 5 more years. It's like, let's actually approach relationships from a healthier baseline. And that's really, my hope for this podcast.
So, Christy, you're talking a little bit about this shame, fear, and control cycle, right? And ways that we can get caught in it. And so you talked about how shame was a huge part in your story for sure over the years. But are there any blind spots that you had in singleness that started to pop up as you did a little bit more self-reflecting, sitting with your thoughts, journaling, all of that? What was a blind spot that maybe totally caught you by surprise? Maybe you're like, oh, this is not me at all. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is here. Did you have any of those?
Sure do. Sure do. Yeah. Well, where do we start? There were more than a few. Yeah, I would say, I would say that shame, fear, and control category of lies, those were all blind spots. I knew nothing of the sort, right? I had done a ton of therapy, but never understood kind of those categories of thought patterns that were really subconscious and pretty deep rooted. But the good news is like they didn't take forever to like go away. Once they're identified, it's actually a pretty clear path. And we talk about this in the course. But I would say one that we haven't talked about yet is self-protection. So kind of funny story, actually, how this came about. Talk about guy friendships. I can't even remember how it really came up, but I was traveling with a friend back from a wedding. And so we happened to, a guy friend, happened to fly back together to San Francisco. And I don't know, again, I'm blanking on how this came up, but for some reason he decides to tell me I'm actually working. I think we talked about dating, like, hey, how's it going? Like, any updates in that category of life. And he said something like, well, yeah, actually, I realize I need to like process a lot of self-protection kind of tendencies. And I literally out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I've never struggled with that. It's just like I've never struggled with that. And he kind of looks at me like, I'm like, yeah, okay, I believe you. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he starts walking through self-protection. And I kind of like sit there and our plane's like taking off. And I just remember, I just started crying. I just like literally am like, oh no. Like actually I've been doing a lot of self-protecting and like, so, okay, what does self-protection look like? I would say a big part for me is I had a negative narrative, a negative movie script, whatever you want to call it, for men. And this comes from very real experiences and past trauma and different things where I couldn't trust men. And I couldn't trust men to protect me. I couldn't trust men to be there for me. I couldn't trust men to be proactive. I couldn't trust men to obviously protect me and my feelings or my wants, my desires. And I did have a lot of amazing men in my life. So I want to make that clear. Like I had, amazing dad, amazing brother, amazing colleagues and friends along the way. But I also experienced a lot of trauma. I would say a lot in college and post-college. And so I had this negative, literally real in my head when it came to the opposite sex that I really didn't understand. And so I would self-protect, like someone who's kind of like flirty and then all of a sudden like, gets distracted with his phone. I would immediately go to they're texting another girl. I'm out. Like I would just leave the conversation, like whether we're at like a dinner party or we're at, a friend's birthday or whatever, I would just immediately exit. And it's like, well, that's self-protection. Like maybe he was texting his mom. Who knows, right? Like I have no idea why he opened his phone, but I would immediately go to the worst case scenario in those types of situations. I definitely put everyone in the friend zone for like a solid, probably 5 years. I was like, nope, not going there. So that was also definitely like a self-protection mechanism. Where anyone remotely attractive or like in San Francisco, I was just like, nope. Anyone I worked with, I was like, nope, not going there. That was self-protection. Like, It was like, totally fine to have those types of relationships in that working environment. And it's a huge company. It would have been totally okay, right? It was not a direct report scenario or anything like that. But I was like, oh, off limits for me, which is like,
Mm-hmm.
what the heck? Like, this is a company. I believe in its mission. I believe in its vision. This is probably a great place to find a husband, but I, in self-protection, just decided to shut it all off. So I would say it was a huge blind spot until that moment when my friend decided to say, oh yeah, this is actually something I'm working through in therapy and, or whatever he's doing. But I realized like, oh shoot, this is actually playing out in a bunch of different categories in my life. So
Right. Wow.
yeah, that was a
I
blind
love
spot
I
for
love
sure.
that intentionality that you have though, when someone says something, I mean, you in your moment of, oh, I've never had that. But then afterwards you took a moment to sit with it. Is this here? And then obviously the waterworks start coming and you see, whoa, this has actually been playing out in my life in a large way. And so I think it's so important to have your eyes open with what you're dealing with in friendship circles, different things like that, things that you're talking to your friends about, all of this. It's like processing through it afterwards. Hey, this was brought up in conversation today. Am I navigating through this? Am I struggling with this? Or do I need to dig deeper into this? And so it's so good because oftentimes I think that's why we have community, is because there are blind spots and they see things that we don't see. Right. And so to isolate is just leaving room for you to stay stuck in your same old ways, right?
Yeah. And like we understand this with business, right? Like there's so much research that shows like the more diverse your board of directors is, the more profitable you are. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I am of the personal belief that that's also true in our personal lives. And so we have people that are enforcing negative behaviors or unhealthy behaviors, or they're not making healthy choices in their life. It's like that actually does affect you, whether you'd like to believe it or not. Like so many people are like, oh, I just have this friend. I've had this friend forever. But this friend doesn't match up in where you want to go. Well, then
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a hard conversation. And I definitely had many of those moments where I would say, I had to like really like, you would like prune a plant or something. Like I had to prune certain relationships in my life because they weren't heading in the direction that I wanted to go. And
Right.
it's really hard to head in a healthier direction with no one around you to support you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like a good example of this is there's some research that was put out, I think probably around 2017. I was reading it because I think it was around the time I joined Facebook. And they were saying that community is actually the biggest like positive factor in people getting out of rehab and staying sober. So the example
Mm-hmm.
is if you are in some kind of addiction cycle, you head into rehab, you get out of rehab, right? So you've had like a certain amount of weeks or months where you are out of your addiction. If you go back to your old life with your old friends, like it's a very, very high correlation to you going back to your addiction, be it drugs or alcohol. But if you move and you change the people around you, and now you're surrounded with people who don't know you're a former addict or people who are making healthier life choices. And so you get to go do. So my example was I shared, I was literally blacking out, binge drinking. That was subconsciously definitely a coping mechanism to a bunch of shame I was dealing with how I was living my life at the time. And I realized this, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. But all of my friends were friends that went out and drank a lot. And so I
Mm.
started realizing, okay, in order to spend time with these friends, I've got to go drink. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to do that anymore. So what do I do? And I was like, well, I can go for a run with people or I can go for a walk around the lake. So I was living in Austin at the time. And so it was pretty clear pretty quickly which friends actually wanted to spend time with me and which friends just would rather go drinking. And so my friends that naturally like still wanted to hang out with me, even though I wasn't going to happy hour with them or I wasn't going out drinking, it was like, oh, these are actually friends that I want in my life still. And it was so
Right.
beautiful to see how that just naturally happened by making that one shift, that instead of going up and meeting up with a friend for happy hour, now I was like, you know what? I'm going to go on a walk or I'm going to go on a run or a bike ride. Do you want to come with me there instead of meeting you up? I know our usual was like meeting up for happy hour on a Thursday or something. And it sort of naturally then like pruned away those relationships that actually weren't in it for me anyway. And they were definitely not going to help me where I wanted to go. And so I absolutely agree with you. Like the people we have around us are definitely going to indicate our future. And so if you want to make different choices in your future and you want your future to look different than your current life,
Mm-hmm.
then you've got to find people that can support you in that, just like a company finds a board of directors to help them get where they want to go.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. And I mean, even going back to a little bit on the self-protection piece and then thinking about, say, you're dealing with self-protection in your life, you're recognizing these patterns. breaking up with the lies of that. But then it's like, hey, we need these healing experiences in order to get a new thought pattern created in our brain with this, right? And Evangeline chatted about this. You and her chat about this on your episode together, where it's like friendships actually allow us to have healing experiences. And when you have people who are really in your corner, then they actually know, oh, Christy's been dealing with self-protection. I need to help her walk through this, you know? So like, who are these friends that you can share these things with, and then they can pull you out of these unhealthy cycles and old patterns that you don't want to live in anymore, you know? And so those are such essential things that we need. And it takes vulnerability, it takes hard work, but it's the results and the transformation is really beautiful, right? And so we are, yes, huge advocates for community. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say another one too for a lot of single working professionals. So I love my parents, but not always. Like, I mean, marriages are hard, right? And I got the front row seat to that for, 18 years or whatever. And so I didn't really come out of the gates with like a strong picture of like a marriage that I felt like I was like, oh, I'm really excited about this. And again, I love my parents. Their marriage is really beautiful today. But was hard growing up as you're raising kids and different things, play into that. So then I get into the workplace and I actually see a bunch of marriages like exploding. And it was super interesting. Again, I didn't realize that I had like this negative cycle when it came to marriage. And it was totally subconscious, being surrounded by a bunch of people that hated their marriages and complained about it and vented at work. And so what I realized is and I didn't realize this until I literally had this boss that like, for some reason, I can't remember, he was like, planning to take his wife out for this date and his babysitter canceled or whatever. And I just happened to like hear about this and I happened to be free. And I was like, I'm willing to babysit for you. Like, I don't have anything going on that day. Like, I'm happy to do that. And of course he was like, you don't have to do this. And I was like, no, like I had already met his kids, like some party or whatever. He had brought him to work. Well, I get there and it was so neat to see people genuinely in love after 3 kids. And they were like going on this date night. And I was like, wow, you can have a marriage like that in your 40s. Like you could still like each other. You could still like go on dates. And it was actually this pretty profound moment where I realized I didn't have marriages in my life like that anymore, because I had been single, all throughout. I had dated in at this point, but I had been, mostly single, not really surrounded by other married people, because my married people go hang out with other married people and they start having kids. They hang out with people who are married and have kids. So you kind of like naturally progress in your cycle of like hanging out with single people and seeing less and less examples of marriage. And so I would say too, to any single working professional, get a colleague, get someone who actually really likes their marriage and like go over to their house once a month and just see it and like see how that plays out. Because most of us, again, like, over half of marriages end in divorce. Like a lot of us, again, have this negative reel when it comes to partnership and marriage. And I would say like, arguably a lot of people I coach have this subconsciously. And so it's definitely something that plays a role. Again, it's just a faulty lens that we're operating from that I think we can get rid of. And I think we can actually have hope for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you, Christy, for hopping on in the hot seat. Did great. And yeah, there's still more that we actually need to talk about, but this just opens up a whole new can of worms. So thanks for joining in today if you listened. And yeah, this is Project Celebrating Singles. We're dropping content every Tuesday. Check us out at celebratingsingles.com if you want to get into the online curriculum that we have. We're coining it for less than 1 therapy session, y'all. Less than 1 therapy session. You can start to rewrite the narrative of your life with your romantic status, finding value in all these things. And so, yeah, we're just so grateful for your time today, and we'll catch you next week.